Hey, what's happening, buddy? This is Haydn with A Designer Who Codes. And today we're talking all about the Bootstrap 5 grid system and how to use it. So the grid system is probably the most powerful tool you're going to use in the Bootstrap arsenal because everything works inside of the grid. In order for the grid to fully operate, we have to take one step back. Inside of the Bootstrap 5 docs, you'll find the grid number 3 and containers number 2. The container is where everything starts working from. So when I write my grid, I'm going to start inside my code and I'm going to use div class container. This is a container. Now, why is the container so critical? If we save this project, you'll notice the container sits a little bit outside the edge of this design. The H1 does not use the container. And for the fun of it, let's actually bring it in. There we go. Cool. You know what? Let's not have two H1s. That's better. Now we have hello world. You'll notice something as I move this browser, the type eventually starts jumping right here to here. And as I go narrower, 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 and narrower, come on, browser. There we go. We hit the mobile framework. That's because the container contains the breakpoints. And if we look back inside of our documentation, there are breakpoints inside the container which work based upon the grid. Inside this container, it shows that there is the container, which is the mobile framework at 100%. Then we have a breakpoint at small, medium, large, XL, double XL, and a fluid, which I almost rarely use only because it just makes everything 100%. And then it doesn't include the breakpoints as a container. So there is a container fluid, but for this demonstration, we're going to use container just as is. If you adjust it, the breakpoints do stop and then everything hits the 100% mark. That's not what we want usually when we come to the grid system, but it's there if you want to use it. All right. The container is what contains all the breakpoints, small, medium, large, extra large, and XXL. Knowing that, we can build the grid to then adjust based upon each one of these breakpoints. And the last thing I'll touch upon the container is note that these little pieces right here, SM, MD, LG, XL, and XXL. We're going to use these throughout the grid to adjust our design based upon which size. Now note the container at the very base does not have it. By default, Bootstrap is a mobile first environment. So everything's 100% by default until we hit a breakpoint that is larger than a specific size. Also note these are just for reference points that each SM, MD, LG, XL, XXL refers to a 1400, a 1200, a 992, 768, 576, and once again, of course, below 576, the mobile framework. That corresponds to the browser width. So as this gets bigger or smaller, the breakpoints come into play. Knowing that, let's try to bring in some grid into our container. So inside of our grid, or inside of our container, hello, this is a container is going to go away. So we have to use rows. So div class row to designate where the grid goes. And in the row, if I say div class equals call, this is a column. If I then save, copy, and do it 3 times, 1, 2, 3, what we'll get is this is a column, this is a column, and this is a column. And watch what happens. As it gets smaller and smaller, the breakpoints will get closer and closer together as we get the container to be smaller and smaller. But notice something. This is a column, this is a column, and this is a column doesn't break to the mobile 100% framework. What I want this to do is I want this to drop down. I call this version of a call the dumb calls, because it doesn't tell me anything about the columns when I hit the mobile environment. By default, these columns are just mobile friendly, which means they're going to stay a 3 column across the page because we haven't told it to change from the small or anything larger. Let's do something different. Let's type call SM3, call SM3, and call SM3. Did my math wrong. So let's go call SM4, and I'll explain why it's 4 and not 3 in 1 second. If I refresh this, check it out. What it does is when it hits the small size, it'll then go to a 3-column system. Let's break it out right there. The reason why is that by default, these columns will all go to 100% unless otherwise specified. What that means is when it hits the smallest size, which is above 576, it's going to return to the 3-column system. If I wanted to go back to that mobile 1 column down the page, I can then change, for example, to MD, MD, and MD, which means this is going to stay this 1 column design even in the small, and then when it hits the medium, it'll revert back to this 3-column system. Now, why did I choose 4 as a numerical value? That's because if we scroll down, where did it go? Oh, I'm in the containers. I had to go back to the grid. Here we go, grid system. So if we look at it right down here, I gotta find that part. Here is where we're doing all the magic. So the number of columns is 12. So we can use math. I know I'm an art major here, so that can be tough at times. But if we think about it in a logical way, this row makes up 12 columns. So the reason why I said 4 is 4 plus 4 plus 4 equals 12. So thereby I have a 3-column system. If I wanted to create another column of equal proportions, then what I would do is I take this one and say 3, 3, 3, and 3. Let's see how much space that creates. Still pretty good. It gets a little bit crowded. What I can then do is adjust the size based upon the breakpoint. Let's say that this is a bit crowded for the 3, 3, 3, and 3. So I'm going to say, you know what, let's go LG on the 3. We'll change this to LG, and we'll change this to LG and one more. Well, this will then go right back to this 1 column. So what I can then do is say call MD 6. I'll take this one, copy it in, and now check out what happens. 2 column on the 6, 4 column on the large, or actually I guess it would be 2 column on the medium and 4 column on the large. So now I can create multiple breakpoints based upon my design, and since by default everything goes back to 1 column, I have the power of adjusting 1 column, 2 columns, and 4 columns. Also, in addition to number of columns, there's a default gutter width of 1.5 rem or 0.75 rem on either side, on the left and right. Eventually, they're going to call this start and end. I generally leave my gutters by default only because Bootstrap pretty much had a great default gutter system, well, by default. But if I do want to change it, I can go into gutters and add some more if need be to the project. For more Bootstrap goodness, I have a playlist right here that identifies the 3 big changes of Bootstrap and more to fully understand how Bootstrap works. As always, I'm Haydn Adams with A Designer Who Codes.